sorry guys, didn't see you there. Just chilling in the garden, enjoying a nice day. Been a while since we did one of these. Yeah, been a very while. Several years, I think. In fact, 4 years. I think the top 100 video, I did like a little thing at the beginning of that. But yeah, ongoing productivity in bad education towers is not great. You're welcome. Which is the whole point at the beginning of this little video here, because the original intention of this was to be like a 300 subs celebration video. I put a tweet out and asked what video I should do to celebrate, and Ryan replied and gave me the topic. And then I just basically sat on it for 2-3 years, which will probably be confirmed in a screenshot maybe, if I can find out the original message on the Nazi bin fire that is Twitter these days. But now we're at like 391, so it doesn't really make sense for it to be kind of framed as that. And the whole thing I had scripted out was basically me trying to tell my eldest our number of subs, but he was too busy paying attention to his A-level exam revision to do that, and he's now in his second year university, so a lot of time has passed. Didn't make any sense, couldn't be bothered rewriting it. Let's have a little chat out in the garden and just do a little, yeah, that's what we're here for, just a little how you doing before the video starts. So how you doing? Hope you're all okay. Oh, delicious. So yeah, settle back with your drink if you got one, and enjoy this video, which is about now you have to help me. What is this one about? So, Zardoz. Bloody Zardoz. My best pal Ryan picked this because on one of our pre-COVID Oscar nights where we go to his house and eat snacks and watch the Oscars.
Cooperation makes it happen.
One time we watched Zardoz. Can't remember why, but we did. Like, the whole film and everything. Now Zardoz is one of those films that's always said with a certain tone, like, Zardoz. Like it's the punchline to a joke that everyone has already heard. And that's because it's defined by two things. 1, giant flying stoneheads to spit out guns, and 2, Sean Connery in his pants. Thanks to the internet's ability to reduce anything down to a single image, this is what the film is known for. Sean Connery in his pants. Actually, this is probably a good time to talk about Connery for a bit. Now you can chop his career up into big broad chunks. You've got Bond, not Bond, supporting actor A number 1. Zardoz fits into that middle period, right at the start of it in fact. In that après-Bond time, Connery, he did do films and that, but none had anywhere near the success of Bond. There's some amazing stuff in there, don't get me wrong. I mean, some not so much, but it sure as sugar puss ain't as bad as Michael Caine's similar period. As we said, Zardoz is at the start of the not Bond period. After leaving that franchise for good-ish with Diamonds Are Forever, he scored himself a 2-picture deal with United Artists. The first film in this deal was The Offence, which, whilst well reviewed, was such a commercial failure that United Artists pulled out of the deal with Connery. So when he was offered Zardoz, he took it because, a job's a job, right? He was replacing Burt Reynolds, who was initially cast but had to pull out due to sickness. That, or maybe he saw what costume he was going to be wearing and was like, nope. There is this part of his biography where he refers to the film and kind of wishes he made it, but who knows. Anyway, after all this, we were granted that iconic image of Connery, which defined the film and that area of his career. Cool, right, now, back to the film itself. Right, where to start? Well, let's start with what is Zardoz? Well, Zardoz is a film, right, that came out in 1974. It's a dystopian sci-fi film, which puts it right in that clump of films like Soylent Green and Omega Man, Rollerball and Logan's Run. Films you can kind of boil down to, it's all gone a bit shit, but here's a lad who might sort some stuff out, but will probably die before he can or something. Written and directed by John Boorman, fresh off the success of Deliverance. Around this time he was trying to get a production of Lord of the Rings together, which fell through. So he wrote a novel, which was Zardoz, which then became a film, which then became a novelisation of the film Zardoz. A Zardoz novel. And yes, in an effort to be thorough, I bought the bloody thing. I bought bloody Zardoz the bloody novel because why not, what else is there to do? Oh, and I watched the bloody thing again as well, I mean, the last time I watched it, I was very sleepy after too many cherry bakewells, so I really needed to. So, in summary, I watched it again, I read the book. Here we go then. Bloody Zardoz. Right, let's just go through the film and do a recap so that we're all on the same page. After a floating head with a dapper moustache introduces himself as Zardoz and confirms that he can't die,
I am immortal.
we're off into the film, which is in the year 2293 apparently. One quick interjection. Can I just say that I always appreciate it when a film uses the same logo in the film that's on the poster? It's a lovely touch. We're in a big dystopian wasteland where a big old floating head comes down to its chosen ones, a bunch of folk known as crazy red nappies who worship the flying head, who calls itself Zardoz, and refers to itself as their god. Said flying head spits out guns to these followers as it dispenses delightful nuggets of wisdom.
The gun is good. The gun is good. The penis is evil. The penis shoots seeds.
Into this world enters Sean Connery, aka Zed. He clearly has shenanigans in mind, as he has at some point snuck into Zardoz's big flying head and hid himself. He sees that the ship's engine or fuel or whatever is a load of vacuum-packed folk in the buff. Someone then shows up, who Zed promptly shoots. Turns out it's our pal from the intro, only now with the rest of his body. He then floats out of the head and goes away? The head flies on and then lands in what appears to be a farm. Zed has a good old nose about things as they get less dystopian and a bit more 70s sci-fi. He finds a party room. And then he finds out what an iPhone looks like in the 23rd century. He then sees some other folk who are heading off towards a big old mansion house. We then see a naked lady on a horse because, the 70s, which gets Zed's attention. He sees another lady who is in the lake, who maybe mind zaps him? We then find out Zed thinks he's in the vortex.
The vortex.
Which has been positioned by Zardoz as some kind of heaven in the minds of the exterminators. Who are they? We then get a flashback of Zed's previous life as an exterminator. Horseback riding, pistol wielding, women stealing, shouting and killing, son of a guns. They spend their days harassing what's left of humanity as it lives a medieval existence to the brutals. The lady from before, not the one on the horse, May, and another lady named Consuela are now working through Zed's memories, as he rapes and pillages in the Outlands. He also demonstrates incredibly poor man management skills. May is more open to investigation. Consuela very much wants to kill Zed to maintain their status quo. They talk to someone?
Is Arthur Frane's memory transmission still functioning?
Arthur Frane ceased transmission 3 days ago.
It kind of sounds like someone from Flash Gordon that can go back through people's memories. Specifically Zardoz, but they can't see the moment of his death, meaning they don't know your boy Zed was the killer. They also mention reconstruction has begun, which refers to a new clone of Zardoz being grown. This is because they are Eternals. Not those Eternals, though we might come back to that. Because of the split opinion in how to deal with Zed, May wants to put it to a vote. The vote is a load of bored-looking folk in a fancy room who want some more of Zed's murderous actions, labelling it as entertainment.
Just entertainment.
There's a suggestion of selective breeding in the exterminators, which we'll come back to much later. Taken in by Zed's manly chest hair, the folk decide to keep Zed around a bit longer so they can investigate him further. After being let out of his cage, he goes off with another of the Eternals, Arthur Friend, who can do some mind zapping of his own.
Ever hear the expression, if looks could kill? Well, here they can.
They then go off into a big storage place full of statues and art from different eras of history which has been catalogued. Does Friend have a lot of time in his hands?
Yes!
Lunchtime! Zed gets to go to a glass pyramid instead. And get some more science done to him, which gets cut off thanks to some dude called George who's currently on trial in another vortex which is being beamed to everyone. He is, apparently, a liar.
He's lying.
Bread making! With clothes that wouldn't make it past a modern risk assessment, with a weird oven spitting out green bread that these folks apparently love so much. This happens.
Friend.
Which I don't think ever gets explained. Two folks are a bit weird. Usually the guy gets 6 months of aging as punishment. See, for the immortal Eternals, being made old is the ultimate punishment, handled by that talking computer which is now being referred to as the Tabernacle.
But the Eternal Tabernacle simply rebuilds me.
Which sounds like one of those words that should be dirty but actually isn't. We then meet other folk who have been punished with aging, the Renegades. Essentially a group of old senile Eternals living off by themselves to pay for whatever crimes they have committed. Zardoz's friend feels at home now.
I myself feel quite at home in it.
We then meet the Apathetics, folk who just like standing about the place before we get interrupted again by the trial. George isn't happy with things, but Friend is on his side. Zed gets distracted, shall we say? But the sheer apathy of the person stops Zed in his tracks. Apparently being apathetic is like a disease worming its way through the other vortices, which Zed isn't happy about and has a big old tantrum. This drop wakes up one of the Apathetics. George gets 5 years.
Sentence: George Seydon will be aged 5 years.
Welcome to paradise.
Right, this next bit is going to be a bit tricky to discuss on YouTube thanks to the Orsian algorithm, but it's essentially about penile erections. We find out that Eternals can't get erections, following them no longer needing to procreate, which caused their sexual desire to wither away. But not Zed, and he's going to help them with their research by getting showed videos that again, you probably can't show on YouTube. Point of all this, that the only thing that stimulates Zed is Science Lady Consuela. Zed sleeps for 4 hours. Eternals don't sleep, apparently, instead they meditate.
Sleep became obsolete, and second-level meditation took its place.
Zed is confirmed by May as being a mutant. What generation?
Second, maybe third generation.
Mentally and physically superior to everyone, so she says. May thinks about destroying her, but decides to hide her knowledge. Zed's friend starts an argument over lunch where Consuela kicks off another vote over whether or not they should destroy Zed.
Vote!
The results are in already. He has 7 more days to be examined, then he's to be killed. A lady starts singing, which then kicks off a pose-off, which is apparently about going to the second level, which Friend really doesn't want to do.
I will not go to second level, no.
He starts spouting his secret thoughts. This gets him classed as a renegade and cast out. Zed scarpers into the woods until he hits a boundary of the vortex, an invisible shield separating him from the Outlands. He uses pals from before but cannot get to them. He is, apparently, trapped. Zed visits the renegades looking for a friend who has a new look but seems not to be as senile as the others. An old-fashioned square go kicks off, but Zed calms him down with a crutch. I said crutch. Settle down. Friend reveals that all he wants is the release of death from his eternal life.
Sweet death.
Zed asks about the Tabernacle and meets one of its inventors who was made a renegade because he wouldn't conform like the rest of the Eternals. Apparently May knows something about what will allow them to die. May, however, isn't at lunch anymore, but is rather under a sheet. Zed opens up his mind and his memories to her so she can discover the truth. Zardoz was using the exterminators to manage the population of the Brutals, until one day Zed was enticed into a library by a mysterious fellow. And shown books which he soon learns to read. He reads everything. Then he finds a book called No, He Won't Say.
What was the name of the book?
I don't remember.
Tell me.
May takes Zed's memories to the stone head, revealing that he killed Arthur. The book title is teased again. Zed then reveals how Zardoz had changed his orders. The exterminators now rounding up the Brutals rather than killing them and making them farm, the harvest of which Zed used to get into Zardoz's flying stone head. Zed had fellow mutant exterminator pals, who also know about the book, which Zed won't reveal the title of to May. But I mean, come on mate, we've all got eyes, yeah? We can all figure it out. Oh, the Wizard of Oz!
The Wizard of Oz.
The Wizardoz. The name of the film, right? Gotcha. Zardoz used this concept of shouting magic man behind a curtain to control the Outlands, which Zed realised, which is why he decided to look behind said curtain in order to get to the truth. Or revenge?
You wanted revenge?
The truth.
No truth.
Revenge?
No, wait, revenge. Things start to get a little saucy under the sheet, but Consuela interrupts, or tries to, as Zed fights off her psychic attacks. Now blinded, Zed gets escorted out and gets medicine whilst hanging in a tree branch. This mysterious lady, who I think Zed first met on the horse, still not found wearing a t-shirt, says that she'll help Zardoz if he sets her free. She gives him a power up for later, which I don't think is mentioned again. She then reveals some of the history of the vortex, how the rich and powerful people cut themselves off as the world collapsed outside. Zed is now the price they must pay for this isolation. The Eternals are now in a killing frenzy, and are after Zed much like the Renegades were earlier. Zed forces his way through indestructible plastic, which everyone is well impressed by. Enough so that Zed can scarf her again. A chase ensues. Things start to escalate, then one of the apathetics licks some of Zed's sweat. He then starts passing it to the others, much to Zed's annoyance. Zed then gets a peck on the lips, which again gets passed around, which wakes up the apathetics in a very touchy-feely way. This is interrupted by Consuelo on a horse. No, really. Oh, and that's when he ate the power-up. Geez, that was around for all of what, 5 minutes?
When the need arises.
6 minutes and 5 seconds. Close enough. Further chasing happens, the Renegades stick their oar in as well. Zed says he'll bring death to them all if he's taken to friend.
Death. Bring death to you all.
Things are continuing to escalate further. So much so that Zed needs to be hidden in a wedding dress. May sneaks into Friend's storeroom. She asks Zed to inseminate her and her followers.
Inseminate us all.
Doesn't even ask him out for a drink first. This will be outside of time, apparently, where they will give him knowledge by touch teach, and he will give them his seed. This means we get a lot of people getting stuff projected onto them with lots of dissolves that last a very, very long time. Zed absorbs all of their knowledge. The vortexes were intended for space travel as an ark, the Renegades made up of the scientists who invented the technology. The Eternals were their children born into a life of immortality. We see them using the tabernacle to erase the memories of how they built it to make sure they wouldn't be able to destroy it, which in hindsight backfired a fair bit. Did the Eternals succeed at solving the mysteries of the universe?
We failed.
Oh dear.
Destroy it!
Zed starts shooting at the place trying to destroy the tabernacle, which doesn't work. But he does see that there are smaller ones inside the head of each Eternal, which is how all of their funky science works. As part of that, some lady, who might be the horse lady, gives Zed a real big crystal for him to look into when he's ready. Now wearing clothes that still display that resplendent chest hair, Zed wanders around a wax museum and comes across a now revived Zardoz, who demonstrates glass ball skills that wouldn't be matched until David Bowie's Labyrinth a decade later.
It's a crystal. Nothing more.
And yes, I do know it wasn't actually Bowie, but another dude behind him trying to do the tricks without seeing what he was doing as Bowie laughed. Laughed you hear as he struggled on with a box full of balls.
I had fun. It was very amusing. I don't think Michael Motion, the juggler, had much fun. It was agonising for him.
Anyway, weren't there people still trying to smash their way into the place? I mean, who knows at this point? Oh, yes, the people are still outside. I guess it's all been a bit timey-wimey while Zed did his knowledging and seeding. Things get wrecked. Zed looks into a ball. Consuelo can't kill him because now they're in love. Zed is now able to see into the crystal and realises that this is in fact the tabernacle, as it's a big old storage device. The tabernacle offers Zed membership, but he turns it down before getting taken into the crystal, where there's a slide and lots of mirrors, but not in a cool Enter the Dragon kind of way. Zed says tabernacle a lot.
Tabernacle! 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 Tabernacle!
Until he's scared by a lot of interpreted dance, which again lasts a long time. Zed then shoots himself right in that manly chest. A lot of statues get absolutely wrecked. An unconscious Zed is picked up by his pals, but then he wakes up. Apparently he has an aura people can stay inside of.
Stay close to me, inside my aura.
So he does that thing you do to hold off velociraptors. which apparently works so well that time reverses. Fetch quest completed, Zed takes the crystal back to the old dude who invented it, who realises that the vortex is an offence against nature.
The vortex is an offence against nature.
So Mother Nature fought back via Zed. The old dude promptly dies, which is good, signalled by the Zardoz head falling from the sky.
Look!
We get another pose off. Zed sends May off with the crystal, giving anyone else a high five. Apart from that last person, what a bastard. Back in the vortex, the renegades are now dying with the Eternals calming down a bit. Zardoz literally pops up and smugly announces that he should get the credit, as was all due to his selective breeding plan that produced Zed. But then Zed reveals that something else was using them to set this plan in motion.
It was I who led you to the Wizard of Oz book. It was I who gave you access to the stone. It was I. I bred you. I led you.
And I have looked into the face of the Force that put the idea in your mind. You're bred and led yourself.
Which I think means it was the tabernacle, but I mean, who really knows at this point? Back to another pose off where it's announced that everyone is now mortal. Zed is now a liberator.
Zed, the liberator.
One at the business end of a handgun. However, he just can't shoot anybody now, but you know what? His mutant exterminator pal sure can. With the barrier down, they can now shoot and stab the Eternals who welcome them with open arms. Zed and Consuela, then Scarpa. May and her gang, all presumably pregnant by Zed, make it out. Friend and Arthur do not. Zed and Consuela find the wreckage of the Zardoz head, which then becomes their house. The band doesn't make it. Zed pals look for him, but the only answer they have is the silence of the dead Eternals. Consuela gives birth while Zed watches in a polo neck. The film then plays out with Zed and Consuela looking out of the screen at us. Through a series of dissolves they and their child age. You'll note that said child also shares his father's disdain for wearing t-shirts. Once he becomes an adult, he leaves, leaving Zed and Consuela to age further, eventually becoming skeletons. The last shot is 2 handprints on the wall, along with Zed's old gun. And you're done. Woo! Right. So, what the hell was that all about then, right? The actual ABC of the plot is fairly straightforward. Zed sneaks into a place, learns its secrets, and uses them to free humanity from their stagnation. Simple. Your modern equivalent would be something like Avatar, the outsider entering another society and learning their ways and being better at it than anyone else. Both are essentially a reskin of Lawrence of Arabia. Then there is the Wizard of Oz thing, of a random, or maybe not so random, visitor to the world who is after something. Zardoz for revenge/truth, Dorothy for a way home, who along the way reveals the secrets behind the world and makes it better. Maybe? You could argue there's a bit of a hint of white saviour about it, despite the society being savoured being exclusively white. There is also the way that the Society of the Eternals is, on the surface at least, set up as a matriarchy. Now the 2 people who look to be in charge are May and Consuela. They're the ones issuing orders to the others, even though any big decisions are voted on by everybody. This is somewhat of a subversion, as both are big science ladies full of logic. The stereotype would be that the female characters are more in touch with nature, whilst the men are the cold science folks. The real answer there is that the Eternals as a whole have become detached from Mother Earth, it being an offence against nature and that.
An offence against nature.
Anyways, the main people are women, and then in comes big butch hairy chest Connery with his manliness and his erection, and before you know it they're canoodling under a sheet. So, on the surface it looks like a manly man sorting out the feminist society and doing things properly. But like I said, that's the surface. What you need to factor in is that the Eternals have become, over the course of their immortality, asexual, ascended to beings of logic. They have no real gender, their clothes are similar, their names come across as affectations rather than anything that truly represents them. Zed represents repressed emotion, something that is buried deep in the Eternals. Something which comes out at the end when they're all riding about on horses setting things on fire. Of course, despite that lack of gender, we still get plenty of skin thrust in our faces, not just from Connery. Putting this in context, we're past the sexual revolution, so at this point in cinema we're seeing a lot more skin everywhere. Zardoz released in 1974, so that's 2 years after the last Tango in Paris, and Deep Throat, so a lot of the boundaries have already been broken by this point. Hell, Borman's previous film, Deliverance, included a scene of male rape, so what would have previously been taboo is now in the mainstream. But in that context, the film almost comes across as quaint. The topless ladies on the horses seem like they're making a point. I mean, Connery cuts about most of the film without top on and that's fine, but really it's borderline gratuitous. Let's just run that back a second. What I think it is that the film is, or sees itself, as highbrow adult science fiction for adults who can deal with nipples and that. Which is fine. It's just when it's juxtaposed with this, and this, and this, then it doesn't come across like that. The film is undoubtedly a horny beast in the way that much of early 70s cinema was. Although, when sorting this script out, I realised that despite it being more than willing to get the skill on display and do some stabbing, not a single swear word in the film. Nothing. I mean, how about that? That's the same for the book, remember that? Which, being a book, means it can take the stuff in the film way further. So this is probably a good time to dig into that a wee bit. So here we have a copy of the Zardoz novel from 1974. You can see it's a fairly typical size, a bit bigger than a standard block of butter. Side by side with some similar models, you can see it's in line with the standard book size, if a little thin. Compared to one of the larger Pro models, you can really see the size difference. But what's in its favour is that it's much more pocketable, and easily fits into a pocket, which you just can't do with the larger versions. Now, I love me a novelisation. I think they still put them out, but it feels like they aren't as big as they were. Like with the proliferation of streaming services and everything, it's much easier to watch the film. Back in the day, a VHS release of a film could sometimes take months, so rereading the book version was a much more viable choice. So I had a load of these: Batman, Batman Returns, Alien 3, Terminator 2. They were interesting to read as well, as they would sometimes include stuff that wasn't in the films. Terminator 2 is a good example. The book had the bit where they take out his chip and reprogram it, which wasn't in the original film. Or this line from the Batman book, which I remember as being in the film, but it actually wasn't.
Get those wonderful toys.
Maybe it was? Who knows? In this case, Zardoz the book pretty much follows the film one-to-one when it comes to plot points and dialogue. What the book does fill in are some of those gaps in the background. For example, in the intro of the film, Zed pops up in a load of grain, whilst in the book you get an idea of him growing up, of his father being an exterminator warlord. There's descriptions of the various exterminator fiefdoms, how they're more organised than they're made out to be in the film. There you just see them cavorting about on horses. The book shows them having a much more structure of social classes and order. This makes sense because, again, it's a book. What takes a couple of paragraphs as an aside would be minutes of precious screen time, so those sorts of differences are understandable. Zed in the book also has much more of an inner monologue that you don't get in the film. To go back to that initial scene where May and Consuelo are showing off his memories to everyone, this scene introduces the Eternals' flat team structure, with May and Consuelo seemingly in charge, but they still go to everyone to vote on decisions. Zed comes across as not having much agency in the scene, of people making decisions about him. It's only later that you realise that he came in with a plan to mess things up. In the book, Zed's role in the scene is much more of an observer, of figuring out the power dynamics of the group, who might be a threat. When they do go to a vote, Zed derisively thinks it makes them slow to make decisions.
He did not allow himself to show pleasure in their discontent, for this would betray his intelligence, and he still had to keep the face of ignorance. The babble of argument rose around him. Zed maintained his air of innocence.
The book can also go a lot further than the film. As previously discussed, it is undoubtedly a horny beast, but the book makes it look positively prudish. That interpretive dance touch-teach section in the film is essentially just a big old orgy in the book. I mean, check this line.
They shook him out of his dream. He was back on the couch. They caressed him, still hungry for his body, awoken from their centuries of glacial frigidity.
Glacial frigidity? Good lord. The fact that the book and the film are so interwoven isn't a shock looking back at how the film was made. This was clearly like a fleshed out treatment of the story that was bashed into a script before being tidied up for publication. It doesn't give any different insights or interpretations of what happens in the film, it just underlines them more than anything else. The slow reveal of Zed's true purpose works for the film, but then having his internal monologue on display in the book does make a whole heap of sense, especially when both build to the big Wizard of Oz reveal. As novelisations go, I mean, yeah, it does the job. It's just a shame the book doesn't go beyond the boundaries of the film to really dig in and expand on some of the ideas it's throwing around. Anyways, let's have a quick chat now about Kubrick in 2001. Zardoz is in a post-2001 world, the film that took sci-fi and made it grow up, treating it seriously, something that Zardoz wants to do as well. I mean, check out that tagline on the poster. Kubrick and Borman were friends. There's unsubstantiated comments on the internet that Kubrick did a bit of uncredited technical consulting on the film, but nothing definitive. There's similar ambition in the stories, of taking a sci-fi concept and making a profound philosophical statement, but Zardoz doesn't pull this off as successfully as 2001 does. I'm not sure if the Tabernacle sequence is supposed to be the equivalent of 2001's Stargate sequence, as both show a character transcending their previous selves and becoming something more. But if we're honest, none of Zardoz gets close to pulling off what 2001 does. Hell, most films that followed in its wake couldn't get close to what 2001 did, so you can't be that tough on old Zardoz. What it comes down to is that man's place in the universe is a more interesting concept than how society stagnates, or at least it is based on how these themes were delivered in these two films. It doesn't help that Zardoz feels like it's pulling in several different thematic directions at once, whereas 2001 is as focused as a laser beam. In Zardoz, you have stuff flying around about religion's place in the world of cold logic, of science versus nature, of how a society without death cannot live. This push and pull of themes is almost resolved thanks to Zed himself, because what he represents in the end is compromise. Initially, he's a feral beast reacting solely on instinct and emotion, the dark reflection of the Eternals who operate on cold logic and reason. Zed takes the best from both societies and, ideally, forms something better. I mean, we don't get to see the end results. We know the ladies who got the high fives roll off somewhere, but the only result we see is Zed's skeleton. It's a lot to put onto Connery. Whilst a great actor, his main strengths are in his raw masculinity, which is what propelled his Bond to iconic status. He gave off an air of danger and charisma that works well in the beginning of the film where Zed is first introduced. You can understand how the Eternals will be drawn in by him, and he does bring a childlike wonder to the role, as he wanders through this world he's never had an inkling of before. But it's in that change, in the more outlandish moments at the end that Connery struggles with. He was always a grounded character, a realist even when he was cavorting about as Bond. But when he's being assaulted by interpretive dancers, he's giving it his best, but you can feel his disconnection from what's going on, which takes us out of it as well. And it just serves to highlight how daft things are. Now, would Burt Reynolds have been any better at this? I'd have to say probably not, so you can't really apply blame to Connery here. If you look at his career, it's mainly action or adventure films with the odd foray into fantasy and sci-fi. Breaking it down, you've got 3 proper sci-fi films in the shape of this, Meteor and Outland. Yes, we all know about Highlander, but that's more of a fantasy. And we will not talk about The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen because it's more superhero than sci-fi. And don't make me watch that film again, please. Anyway, we can discount Meteor as more of a disaster film set in space, aiming to be more of a towering inferno or a Poseidon adventure than anything else, which leaves us with Outland. This is, dare I say, a much better film than Zardoz, and one of Connery's best films of this period. And that's because the film is grounded in that lived-in sci-fi aesthetic that Ridley Scott defined in Alien, which is something that Connery fits into much better. It's also essentially a remake of High Noon, so again you have that western genre underpinning everything, keeping Connery's feet on the ground, accentuating his strengths. That's where he struggles in Zardoz. There are too many moments that expose his weakness in this kind of role. It's a tough call, as Connery is the best and worst casting for that role. At the beginning, you can easily believe that his raw animal chest hair, charisma, could turn the heads of a bunch of immortal hippie space snakes. But when he starts that transition to Liberator, he just can't nail it, which starts to bring down the artifice of the film. You'd have to argue that lies within the script with Borman. On the Zardoz Blu-ray, there's lots of interviews and stuff, and there's an interesting part where Borman says about science fiction stories that it's difficult to identify with the characters. Which makes sense. It would be hard for me personally to identify with an immortal eternal baking bread and talking backwards. But then we're not that far away from Star Wars. And really, one of the great successes of that film was how people identified with Luke Skywalker. He's living in space with robots and space wizards, but when we see him wanting to leave home, staring up at the setting suns of his home planet, that was undoubtedly a moment that hooked in the audience. After all, hasn't everyone felt the same as Luke, looking at the horizon and wanting to go there? And obviously maybe without the two suns, I guess, but you know. Now that's where Zardoz fails, not giving the audience a proper emotional connection to the story. There's no hook to draw you in to make you care. I mean, so what if the Eternals are bored of life? Who cares how they treat the Brutals? Having a morally dubious Britannicus, which Zed certainly is, doesn't preclude the audience from connecting with the character. Hell, Clint Eastwood did it twice for the dollar films in Dirty Harry. Bond himself was quite a great character. Look how that turned out. But that's not Zardoz. Zardoz is prog rock. It is daft outfits. It's a nightmare vision of the future. Or rather, a nightmare vision of the future from the 70s. It's a pretentiousness that the film sticks to until the very end. That comment by Borman is very telling, as it feeds back into that 2001 idea of making sci-fi for grown-ups. That was one of Kubrick's reasons to make 2001, to make, and I quote, the proverbial good science fiction movie. It's a sniffy, looking down your nose ideal that permeates Zardoz. And science fiction films were good before this, even if they weren't necessarily trying to say anything profound. And Zardoz sometimes forget to just be a good film. Is that a good or a bad thing? Trying to make something profound should be encouraged, right? And yeah, it should. But really, when you think about it, the truly profound stuff normally just kind of happens. It's when you try too hard that you hit the tipping point, and profound becomes pretentious. It's like the difference between The Matrix and The Matrix Reloaded, yeah? Some of the stuff in that first film is profound, but by the second, I mean, you try arguing right now, that the architect stuff is just as profound, or that the whole movie pace-killing chat about water filtration is just as profound. No, it's not profound. It's pretentious. That's the trap that Zardoz falls into, of believing that what it's saying is way more important than it actually is. It's also telling that Borman never went back to science fiction. After an Exodus detour, he would fulfill his fantasy ambitions with Excalibur, his take on the Arthurian legends. And after that, his films became much more grounded, some autobiographical, but nothing again like Zardoz. So, where does that leave us then with the big man? Is it a must-see, a hidden diamond, a warning from history? Well, yes to all that. It looks stunning in places, and then also looks like a low-budget TV show. It's throwing around big, interesting ideas whilst also doing this. Undoubtedly, a film like this wouldn't get made again. The closest we've come to is something like Inception. Now, wait, hold on, before you start posting disparaging comments. Just because I don't mean that by tone or visuals or anything like that. What I mean is, both Zardoz and Inception had a director off the back of a huge success, teaming up with one of the biggest actors in the world with carte blanche to make whatever film they wanted. And that's what Borman did. He made exactly the film he wanted to make. And he wanted to make a film where Sean Connery wore that outfit. Now that's Zardoz. That's it right there. It represents unfiltered creative expression, no barriers or restrictions to an artist's vision, and the freedom and dangers that brings. And that begs the question, are artists free these days? With corporations merging together into a giant capitalist black hole, cancelling entire films to save a few bucks, and giving themselves a salary that would pay for an entire film, will we get another situation like Zardoz? Is something like Oppenheimer the closest we have to that idea of an artist given free rein to make what he wants? I mean, I'm sure a studio executive wouldn't have pitched a 3-hour-long biopic about how a big bomb was made, no siree. For a brief moment during the streaming boom, it seemed like that was going to be the case for everything. A money hose fired at people to make stuff. A hose that lasted about, 2 or 3 years before the profits dipped ever so slightly, and so vast swathes of employees need to be sacrificed to the overall growth. There's nostalgia at work here, obviously, the whole back in my day angle. But it's not like this is a new idea. There's plenty of examples in history of this sort of stuff. Zardoz was a film from a period where the film studios were throwing things at the wall, seeing what worked. The 70s were a great period of experimentation. Some things worked really well, and some things like Zardoz didn't. It was a time when creators had control of the wheel, at least for a while, before the money men took back control in the 80s. I'm not sure what kind of conclusion I'm working to here. Zardoz is not a great film, but it's something to be admired. I mean, Jesus, look at some of these shots, they're beautiful. Zardoz is, well, it's Zardoz. It's his own thing to a fault. From the story to the design of the film, it ploughs its own furrow. And you can't help but applaud when you see that, because it's not always possible. So when it's done, applaud. I mean, you got to go hard or go home, right? Very little goes in quite as hard as Zardoz. Hardoz. There you go. Always end on a pun.
All that I was is gone.